It was the spring of 1865. 4 brutal years of civil war were finally drawing to a close. The Confederacy was crumbling, the Union had endured, and Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, stood at the threshold of a peace he had sacrificed everything to achieve. He would never see it last. John Wilkes Booth was one of the most famous actors in America, handsome, celebrated, adored by crowds. But behind the curtain, he burned with fury. A fierce Confederate sympathizer, Booth believed Lincoln was a tyrant, a man who had destroyed the South and must be made to pay. When he learned the president would attend Ford's Theater on the night of April 14th, he saw his moment. Booth's plan was audacious. In a single night, 3 men would strike simultaneously: Lincoln at the theater, Vice President Andrew Johnson at his hotel, Secretary of State William Seward at his home. Decapitate the Union government in one blow. He gathered his conspirators, he gave his orders. The clock was already running. That evening, Ford's Theater was alive with laughter. Over 1,000 people had gathered to watch Our American Cousin. When Lincoln entered the presidential box, the audience rose to their feet. The orchestra played "Hail to the Chief." He smiled, he waved, and he sat down. Somewhere in the shadows of that same building, John Wilkes Booth was already moving. Familiar with every corridor, every staircase, every door, he had performed on this stage many times before. At precisely 10:15 in the evening, the audience erupted in laughter at a line from the play. In that moment of noise, Booth stepped into the presidential box and fired a single shot into the back of Abraham Lincoln's head. He leapt to the stage below, caught his spur on the bunting, and broke his leg on landing. He raised his knife to the crowd and shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always to tyrants. The theater collapsed into panic. Screaming filled every corner. Mary Todd Lincoln held her husband, crying out for help. Soldiers and doctors rushed the box. Lincoln was alive, but barely. Too tall for any bed in the theater, he was carried across the rain-soaked street to the Peterson House, a modest boarding house opposite. They laid him diagonally across a small bed. Doctors worked through the night. There was nothing they could do. Booth fled into the Virginia countryside, his leg broken, his plan in ruins. The attack on Seward had failed. Johnson's would-be assassin had lost his nerve entirely. Over 500 federal troops and detectives scoured the region for 12 days. On April 26th, they cornered Booth inside a tobacco barn at Port Royal, Virginia. The barn was set alight. A soldier shot him through the neck. He was dragged onto the porch, paralyzed, and died within hours. His last words were, "Tell my mother I died for my country." Abraham Lincoln died at 7:22 in the morning on April 15, 1865. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton stood at his bedside and said, "Now he belongs to the ages." Lincoln never lived to see the full reunification of the nation he had preserved. He never saw the 13th Amendment fully take hold, the abolition of slavery he had fought to make law. But his death did not undo what he had built. It only deepened it. Some men become larger in death than they ever were in life. Abraham Lincoln was one of them.